My name is Clara, and I've never been the type to be easily impressed. I grew up in a small town where everyone knew everyone, and the routine was always the same. Mass on Sunday, lunch with the family, gossip in line at the bakery. Nothing extraordinary ever happened there, until the day a new nun arrived at the local convent, Sister Helena. Even her name sounded different. She didn't wear those traditional habits that looked like they were from old movies. Hers was simple, modern, a light fabric that slid subtly over her slender frame. And her gaze, her gaze. It wasn't severe like the others. It held a strange, unsettling sweetness, as if it could pierce through my defenses without even asking for permission. I remember our first meeting as if it happened yesterday, even though it's been more than 4 years. I had been invited to teach art classes at the orphanage the convent ran. I was never religious, but I accepted the invitation for the love of the children. On the first day, amidst papers, brushes, and paints, she walked into the room. The silence was immediate. The children grew still as if an angel had descended among them. And for a second, I swear I lost my breath. She smiled at me with a kindness that left me frozen. She just said, "You must be the new teacher," and left, just like that. But something inside me, something shifted. For weeks, I tried to ignore the feeling. I told myself it was just admiration, respect, maybe even envy for someone who seemed so at peace with her choices. But every time she appeared, my body reacted in a way that frightened me. My hands would sweat, my heart would race, and I'd start stumbling over my words. It was like I had reverted to being a teenager. Me, at 28, self-assured, covered in scars from failed relationships, would fall apart just hearing the sound of her voice in the hallway. And the strangest part, she seemed to notice. She never said anything, but her glances lingered a little longer on me. Sometimes, when I was talking to a child and she was nearby, I'd see her smile out of the corner of her mouth, as if she enjoyed seeing that softer version of me. I started to wonder, was it all in my head? Was I projecting an impossible desire onto someone who, by vocation, had renounced everything? Or was there an opening, a spark hidden beneath the rigidity of her vows? There was one specific day, at the end of a rainy afternoon, when everything seemed to come undone. I was collecting the children's materials and ended up staying late. When I left the room, the convent was almost empty. Only the sounds of the rain hitting the roof and a faint scent of incense filled the air. And there she was, sitting on a bench in the small inner garden, sheltered by a large black umbrella. Her eyes were closed, her lips moving in prayer. I stood still, watching, not daring to interrupt. But she opened her eyes as if she had sensed my presence, and she called to me, "Would you like to sit for a moment, Clara?" I went. I sat beside her, the umbrella covering us, as if creating a small world just for us. We were silent for a while. Then she said, in a serene voice, "You know, sometimes faith doesn't ask us to withdraw from the world. Sometimes it asks us to feel it even more deeply." That broke me. I didn't know exactly what she meant, but every cell in my body understood. I felt a shiver, not from the cold, but from something inexplicable. A connection so profound it seemed to transcend my body, time, and logic. I looked at her, and for an instant, I thought she was going to move closer. But she just smiled, stood up, and said, "Good night, Clara." I couldn't sleep that night. Every detail of that scene replayed in my mind. And for the first time, I admitted it to myself. I was in love with her, with a nun, with someone who theoretically could never return what I felt. And it tore me apart. It was sweet and cruel at the same time, a mixture of guilt, desire, enchantment, and fear. And that's when my life began to split into two worlds. The world of my classes, where I smiled at the children and feigned normalcy, and the world of sleepless nights, where I relived her every word, her every gesture. I started questioning everything, my limits, my beliefs, my old scars. Was it possible to love someone who had taken eternal vows? Can love, when it's pure, cross even what seems impossible? If you've ever experienced an impossible love or something that made you rethink everything, write "I felt that" in the comments and tell me your story. And if you want to follow what happened between us, subscribe to the channel now and turn on notifications. What comes next will surprise you. The following days were a mix of quiet euphoria and internal turmoil. I avoided crossing her path more than necessary, afraid my eyes would give everything away. But deep down, I also wished she would notice, that she would look at me with the same desire that consumed me. I started noticing every detail about her. The way she tucked her hair under her veil, the delicate way she placed her hand over her chest when greeting someone, the soft glow that appeared in her eyes when she spoke about the children or sacred art. It was a beauty that wasn't confined to her body, but spread out like a presence. One afternoon, I had to take some of the children's drawings to her office. I knocked on the door with a racing heart, and she answered it herself. She wasn't wearing her veil that day, her hair loose to her shoulders, a cup of tea in her hands, the scent of chamomile mixed with a light perfume of lavender. I couldn't say anything at first. I just held out the drawings with trembling hands. She thanked me, but noticed my state. "Clara, are you all right?" she asked, her voice so calm it almost made me break down. I wanted to say no, that I was being consumed by something I didn't understand, that I felt as ridiculous and intense as a teenager in love with someone they couldn't touch. But all I managed was a nod and a forced smile. She invited me in, saying there was still some time before the next prayer. I hesitated, but I went in. The room was simple, with neatly organized books, a wooden cross on the wall, and a window that let the afternoon light cast a golden glow over everything. I sat in an armchair while she settled back onto the small sofa. We talked about art, about childhood, about the importance of sensitivity in the modern world, and slowly, my body began to relax. I got lost in her words, in the gentle rhythm of her speech, in the way each sentence carried meaning, until she suddenly stopped talking. She looked at me for a few seconds that felt like hours and said, "You have a light in your eyes when you talk about the children. It's beautiful to see." That disarmed me. I felt a lump in my throat and tried to hide it by looking away. But she kept looking at me. And then something happened that to this day I can't quite explain. She reached out her hand and touched mine. It wasn't a religious touch, nor was it paternal. It was human, warm, present. I felt the world stop. My eyes filled with tears, and I couldn't hold them back anymore. I started to cry, a cry that came from a deep place, as if everything I had been repressing for years was exploding right there, in front of her. She didn't push me away. On the contrary, she moved closer and hugged me with a tenderness I had never felt before. It was in that hug that everything changed. There was no kiss. There were no direct words. But it was there that I realized she felt it too. That what was between us wasn't a figment of my imagination. That the connection was real, no matter how forbidden, confusing, or improbable it was. After that day, I started avoiding her office. I was scared of the power of what I felt and of what could happen. But I missed her too, and every absence ate away at me. A week later, she called me over discreetly after a class. She said she needed to talk. We went to the convent garden, the same one from our first conversation. It was late afternoon again, and the sky was painted orange and violet. She was visibly nervous. She sat next to me and took a deep breath before she began. "Clara, I took vows, and for years those vows sustained me. They gave me purpose, clarity. But since you arrived, something inside me has been thrown into disarray. I find myself questioning things I never dared to question. I feel alive in a new, intense, frightening way. And at the same time, I feel guilty. My heart felt like it was going to beat out of my chest. I didn't expect that confession. Sister Helena was breaking the silence I had been carrying alone for so long. She continued, "I don't want to hurt you, and I don't want to betray what I swore to uphold. But I need to understand what's happening to me. Do you feel it too?" I nodded slowly, unable to hold back my tears. And in that moment, we were no longer a teacher and a nun. We weren't labels or roles. We were two women trying to figure out what to do with a feeling that didn't fit into any ready-made framework. The pain of the choice hung between us, a feeling so pure, yet it carried enormous consequences. I knew I couldn't demand anything. She had a history with God, and I didn't want to be the person who pulled her away from that. But I couldn't pretend it didn't hurt either. If you've made it this far and this story is resonating in your heart, comment, "True love knows no form," and tell me if you've ever experienced something that shook up everything inside you. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, now is the time. There's a lot more of this story to come, and it's far from over. In the days that followed our conversation in the garden, everything inside me felt suspended, as if time had stopped at a point where no decision was possible. I kept going to the convent, teaching my classes, smiling at the children, but inside, I was in ruins. Every time I saw Sister Helena walking through the hallways with that gentle gaze and a certain weight hidden behind her eyes, my chest tightened. It was no longer just passion or desire. It was the feeling of being in the presence of something sacred and at the same time, forbidden. A love that couldn't be spoken aloud, that didn't fit into simple definitions, but that was true in every silent gesture. One morning, just after Mass, I saw her from a distance, kneeling before the altar. The first rays of sun streamed through the stained glass windows, painting her silhouette in shades of gold and red. She seemed serene, but there was something in her posture that made me realize she was fighting the same battle I was, and that comforted me somehow. Knowing that what I felt wasn't solitary, that there was reciprocity, that between us there was something that resisted even the silence imposed by our circumstances. We didn't speak for almost 10 days, a period that felt like an eternity. Then, she sent me a note through one of the children, a simple piece of paper folded in 4 with firm and delicate handwriting. Tonight, after the 7 o'clock prayer, in the cloister, my heart nearly leaped out of my chest. I read it as if it were a secret love letter and spent the entire day imagining what she would say. When the clock struck 7:15, I was already there, sitting on one of the wooden benches in the cloister, a reserved, quiet space filled with ancient, ivy-covered columns. She arrived a few minutes later, her steps light, as if she were floating. She sat beside me in silence. "I've prayed so much these past few days," she began, her voice low. "I asked for signs, for clarity, and all I received was a restlessness that won't cease. I can't get you out of my thoughts, Clara. I tried. Believe me. But I can't pretend this doesn't exist anymore." I held my breath, and she continued. "I don't know what God wants from me now. I only know that He gave me the gift of feeling, and what I feel for you is something I've never experienced before. It's not carnal. It's not vulgar. It's as if my soul is being pulled in your direction." She was crying as she spoke, and so was I. It was the first time we were saying everything without masks, without guilt. For the first time, we were allowing ourselves to be two women who loved each other, even without knowing what to do about it. "I can't just abandon everything overnight," she said, squeezing my hands. "But I can't live a half-life either. I need to find out if there's a path where I can continue serving what I believe in, and at the same time, allow myself to love." That night didn't end with a kiss. It ended with a long, true, aching hug. A hug that said, "I'm here," even without knowing how to go on. And in a way, that hug gave me strength, because true love, no matter how improbable, always finds a way to exist. In the following weeks, we began to meet discreetly, not to live out a hidden romance, but to talk, to walk, to share silences. And in each of these meetings, our bond grew stronger. She started keeping a journal. So did I. It was as if we were carefully weaving the possibility of a story that didn't yet know its ending. One day, she showed me a letter. It was for the Mother Superior. In it, she explained her decision to request some time away, a sabbatical period to reflect. Far from the convent, far from her obligations, but close to herself. I was in shock. It was a huge step. "Are you sure?" I asked, afraid of being the reason for something she might later regret. She took a deep breath and said, "I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing this for me. Because for the first time, I want to listen to myself and understand what God is asking of me now. And maybe, just maybe, He's asking me to love in a new way." The next week, she left. She went to a retreat in another city where she could live out this time of inner listening. Before she left, she gave me a letter. In it, she wrote, "If there is still space in your heart, wait for me." Not as a nun, not as a promise, but as a woman, as someone who wants to live truly, even if it means breaking patterns. I cried for days, but not from sadness. It was a mix of longing, hope, and a strange peace that only comes when you know you've experienced something rare. It was 3 months of silence, 3 months in which every morning began with the same question: will she come back? The absence of Sister Helena, or rather, of the woman behind the habit, had become a presence within me. Everything reminded me of her: the smell of chamomile tea, the songs she would hum softly, even the way the children pronounced my name. It was as if she were still there, occupying an invisible yet palpable space. And during that time, I found myself in 1,000 pieces. The waiting forced me to look inside myself with a raw honesty. I was no longer the same. There was something in me that could no longer fit back into the old version of Clara who pretended not to feel. It was during this period that I started painting again, not out of obligation, but out of necessity. My canvases began to take on more intense tones, deep reds, dark blues, brushstrokes that seemed to scream something my mouth couldn't yet say. And every canvas, deep down, was about her, about what we lived, about what we didn't, about what could still be. Art became my place of prayer. And there, alone in my studio, I realized that loving someone like her wasn't a sin. It was a revelation. It was life. And then, one Saturday afternoon, as I was cleaning my brushes, I heard a knock on my door. I thought it was a neighbor bringing bread or asking for sugar. But when I opened it, it was her, without the habit, without the veil. Her hair was down, held back only by a discreet clip. Simple clothes, a beige coat, a scarf around her neck, and a different look in her eyes. The look of someone who no longer carried the weight of guilt, but the lightness of someone who had chosen with her heart. "Clara," she said, and that alone was enough for me to understand. She had come back for me. I hugged her. Not like meeting someone who had left, but like finding a lost piece of myself. And in that embrace, everything made sense. The waiting, the fear, the silences, the dreams, the contained desires. She told me the retreat had been transformative, that she had cried, prayed, written, and shed her old certainties. That for the first time, she had the courage to ask herself what truly made her happy. And the answer was clear: freedom and love. She requested to be permanently released from her vows, not out of rebellion, but out of gratitude. She said the vows she had made were true, but that God didn't want her trapped. That perhaps her calling had been precisely this: to live a pure and transformative love outside the walls of institutionalized faith with me. Slowly, we began to rebuild our lives. No fairy tales. We had to deal with people's judgment, with invasive questions, with disapproving stares. But there was also support from people who saw courage, truth, and light in us. We took it slow, one step at a time. She had to rediscover herself outside of rituals, outside the rhythm of daily prayers. And I had to relearn how to trust in love as something possible, not as an impending wound. One day she took me to the now abandoned cloister, which was about to be renovated. It was a symbolic place for us. She took a small box out of her pocket and said, "Inside here is everything I wrote to you these past few months. If you want, we can start something new." Not as an escape, but as a surrender. I opened the box. There were several letters, some loose pages, adapted snippets of prayers, verses from songs that reminded me of us. And at the bottom, a small handwritten note. "Faith taught me how to love, but it was you who taught me how to live." I cried, of course. And right there, sitting among the ivy-covered columns, she kissed me for the first time. It was a serene, lingering kiss, full of everything that had been held back for so long. A kiss without guilt, without fear, without sin. We decided to live together. It wasn't easy. There were doubts, crises, moments when the past tried to pull her back. But she resisted, and so did I, because we knew this love wasn't ordinary. It was rare, intense, almost divine. A love born in silence, nurtured in waiting, blossomed in pain, and now flourished in freedom. If this resonated with you, comment below. Love sets you free, and tell me, have you ever loved someone who transformed you completely? And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, now is the moment. The last part of this story is coming, and the ending. The ending will leave your heart beating faster. In the months that followed, our home became a sanctuary of new beginnings. Small, simple, With walls we painted ourselves and canvases that translated feelings that could never fit into words alone. Sister Helena, who now went only by Helena, reinvented herself every day. She left the monastic rituals behind, but kept her contemplative soul. She still woke up early, but now she made coffee for both of us before sitting in the garden with her notebook, writing reflections, poems, free-form prayers, without rules, without guilt, just pure faith in the form of affection. And me? I finally felt whole. I painted with more truth and with more pain too, because to love deeply is also to touch old wounds. But it was a sweet pain that healed as the days went by. I learned that true love isn't about perfection. It's about presence, and she was present. When I had crises of insecurity, when the old, insecure Clara knocked on my heart's door, she was the one who held me with her eyes and said, "You are my home." One evening, sitting on the sofa with a glass of wine, something that was new to her and which she savored with a shy curiosity, we started reminiscing about the beginning of it all. We talked about the note, the cloister, the rain, the children, the restrained glances. And then she asked me, "Have you ever regretted loving me?" I smiled. I took my time answering just to tease her. But then I said, "No, I would have regretted pretending I didn't feel anything." She held my hand tightly. "Not for everything you lost?" she pressed. And I understood the question. Because yes, loving someone like her was not an easy path. I lost friends, heard criticism, was called a vow breaker, a fool. But I gained something that nothing in the world could give me, a love that rebuilt me from the inside out. It wasn't a loss, I said. It was a liberation. And there, in that silence filled with truth between us, I realized we had won. Not against the world, not against the judgments, but against fear. The fear of feeling, of wanting, of touching the sacred with the hands of the soul. Helena, with all her sweetness, found a way to continue caring for people. She founded a small support center for women who, like her, felt trapped between what they were taught to be and what their hearts screamed for them to become. And I painted portraits of these women, capturing on canvas the stories that couldn't be spoken but needed to be seen. We became part of something bigger than just the two of us, part of a quiet and powerful movement that is born every time someone chooses to live their truth, even if it means breaking with everything that seems unbreakable. And then, one spring morning, as we were walking through a field with the scent of wildflowers in the air, she stopped, took my hand, and said, "Do you remember that letter where I wrote that if there was still space in your heart, you should wait for me?" I nodded, a sentimental smile on my face. She pulled something from her pocket, a small box, simple, wooden, with a twine bow. Inside, a small, delicate ring. "I want to make a different kind of vow now, a vow with you, a vow of truth, freedom, and love." And there, with no audience, no ceremony, with only the blue sky as a witness and the song of the birds as a soundtrack, I said yes. Not just to her, but to the life that awaited us, to the path that would still be full of challenges, but also of surrender. Yes to the woman who taught me that even in the silence of convents, the loudest love in the world can be born. If this story has touched your heart, comment. Love is sacred below. Tell me, what was your greatest act of courage in love? I really want to know. And if you still haven't subscribed to the channel, now is the time. Here, every story is an invitation to feel, to reflect, and, who knows, to see yourself.